Augmented Triads. They're amazing chords, and if you don't want to take my word for it, then just look at some of the greats in music history. I'll show you examples from the music of Bach, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, John Lennon, the Monkees, and many more. So let's dive in and let's get creative. The augmented triad is a different type of chord than most of us are used to. The powerful and unique sound of an augmented chord is immediately recognizable. But that also makes them a little bit more difficult to use. Although I think that what you're hearing right now probably sounds familiar to you. I will explain what they are, how other musicians and composers use them, and how you can use them to write your own music. So no matter if you want to learn an augmented triad on guitar or augmented triads on piano, after this video you will write amazing music with them. So what is an augmented triad? The easiest way to see them is as a normal major chord but with a raised fifth. If you want to turn an F major, which has the notes F, A, C, into an F augmented chord, you simply raise the C to C sharp, and there you go. Augmented triads are unstable and dissonant chords, and this makes them want to go somewhere. They want to resolve. They are often called passing chords, a connecting chord in between two other chords. Led Zeppelin's song Kashmir is an amazing example of where the augmented chord is part of an epic climbing pattern. Some of you might say, hey, you're wrong, because no major third is played. Only two notes sound at the same time. You're right, but the major third is part of the melody that's sung by Robert Plant. So if we play the progression with this note added, we get this. So what makes an augmented triad special, and how is it made? For example, a minor chord is made of a minor third and a major third stacked on top of each other. And a major triad is just a major third and a minor third stacked on top of each other. But this is not the case with an augmented chord. Here we need to stack two major thirds on top of each other. And since the notes are all spaced at the same distance, each chord inversion has the same sound. And on guitar, for example, each chord shape is the same, no matter the inversion. Oh, and the chord sign looks like this. You add a plus at the end or write aug behind it, from augmented. Do you hear that? So what you're hearing now is something that you've heard in countless songs and compositions. This is the typical sound of playing a major chord, then turning it into an augmented chord, and then continue to raise the note until it resolves to a different chord. Often the augmented chord wants to resolve to the chord a minor third below or a perfect fifth below. In the Monkees' Tapioca, Tundra, we have a classic example of where the augmented triad resolves to the chord a minor third down. The raised fifth resolves to the root note of our next chord, which is the F sharp, a minor third below. Now let's change the original chord progression so that it resolves to the chord a perfect fifth below. In this case, the raised fifth resolves to the major third of our next chord, which is the F sharp from D major. These examples were in A major, so we went from the tonic to the relative minor, or from the tonic to the subdominant. The easiest and for me one of the most interesting ways of playing augmented triads is by playing a major chord and then from time to time raising the fifth, creating an augmented chord. And you just repeat this, going back and forth. It's that easy, but wait until you hear how it sounds. John Lennon does the same thing like this in his song Starting Over. When he sings the lines Starting Over, He first plays the A major chord and then raises the E to get an A augmented chord. And instead of going somewhere else, he goes back to the A major chord and repeats the same thing. But who's keeping you from playing this an entire verse? Just listen. How we created tension without moving the chord? It creates this strange sensation of going somewhere while you're actually not. When you have a minor chord, you can create the same result by moving the bass note half a step down and back up again. But I'll show this later with the help of a Beatles song. It's nice and very easy. In John Lennon's Starting Over, we see a classic example of a resolution going to a chord a minor third below. But later he resolves the augmented chord to the minor chord a full step above it. You can sweeten up or sugarcoat this resolution by playing a minor 7th chord. Just listen. Augmented chords sound like dominant chords. They have tension, they want to resolve, and they want to go somewhere. And you can make any major chord sound like a dominant chord by raising the 5th half a step, creating an augmented chord. It just depends on how you're going to resolve it afterwards. Let's go back to the example of the Monkees' Tapioca Tundra. At the end of the bridge, they make the dominant chord even stronger by turning it into an augmented chord. They do this by first playing the regular chord and then raising the 5th. This is a classic technique. If you look at the refrain from Something by the Beatles, we have this beautiful downward figure. You don't have to play the whole descending line, you can just switch back and forth, lowering the bass note with half a step down and then going back half a step up. Check it out, it sounds quite dark. For our last technique, we don't always have to approach this augmented chord so carefully. We can also just play it straight away. We can play it at the beginning of the piece or somewhere else where it is in the spotlights. For example, at the beginning or at the ending of a new section. A well-known example is Oh Darling by the Beatles. It starts with an augmented triad. But even Johann Sebastian Bach starts one of his pieces with an augmented chord. And can you imagine such a strong dissonance at the beginning of your piece? Especially for those times? And lastly, listen to this next piano example. The first phrase ends on an augmented chord. And this really highlights the strange and intense character that augmented triads have. I said that an augmented triad could resolve beautifully to a minor 7 chord, a full step above? This is an example of how beautiful the C augmented chord in first inversion can resolve to the D minor 7 chord in first inversion. So I've showed you that you can use augmented triads to add tension on a static chord vamp, to use it as a passing chord or connecting chord, to get an extra strong dominant sound in your chord, or to use it as a striking sound for beginnings, endings, and other important parts. The technique of using augmented triads is an amazing tool that you can use as a songwriter or composer. So if this was useful, then help me out by sharing this video and by liking it. Also, check out my links in the description to the best books on songwriting, composing, and music theory. It's enough to keep you inspired for years. Stay creative, and for now, see you next time.